situation en Irak. Accordingly, the motion is as follows. Mr. Garneau, seconded by Ms. Foote, moves that this House do now adjourn. Debate, débat. L'honorable député de Westmount, Ville-Marie.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it is my honour indeed to lead off on this emergency debate, which deals with Canada's military involvement in Iraq. And I think that it is the essence of democracy that we as a House should have the opportunity to debate this rather important subject, given the fact that we are talking about sending some of our Canadian soldiers into harm's way. What the government has told us so far is that this will be today the Prime Minister mentioned 69 people. It's not clear to me whether those are the special forces or whether it also already includes some of the military that are flying our Globemaster and Hercules aircraft over there. But be that as it may, a number of special forces which will go into the northern Iraq portion of the country in the Kurdish part and provide strategic and tactical advice to the Peshmerga forces there, and that they will clearly be behind the wire during this time and after a 30-day period, and I'm not exactly sure when that clock started ticking, but after a 30-day period, Canada will review whether it will continue with that particular role. So that is essentially what the government has told us, and in committee last week I made the point of asking for assurances that there would be no combat role. In other words, those Canadians would not go to the front lines, would not accompany the Peshmerga on any offensive forays across the front lines or be involved in any defensive operations in case ISIL decided to mount a counteroffensive. I was assured that no, Canada would not be in any combat role. I further asked the question, would the government be sure to inform Parliament if they were contemplating at any point a change in the role that they have described to us thus far? And again, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Defence assured us that that would be the case. Having said that, there are still many questions. I mentioned the details. We find out about 69 today. We don't know exactly when they will arrive over there and when the 30-day clock will actually start. And let me say for Canadians, this is particularly important that we get a sense of the time scale that we are dealing with here. This is not a 30-day operation. This, if one listens to what President Obama said, is going to be a multi-year effort. So we're going way beyond the initial 30 days, and I think that it's important for Canadians to realize that in order to weaken and eventually defeat ISIS or ISIL, it is going to take a rather long period of time, and so there is a very real possibility that the possibility that Canada's role could conceivably change, and that is why it is important for us to get as much information from the government on what possibly can happen and how this mission can evolve. We all know that ISIS needs to be defeated on the ground, and it is all very fine for the coalition to provide modern weapons to Iraqi forces and Kurdish forces. It is also very well for us to provide tactical advice, as Canada will be doing, or as other coalition members may be providing in terms of airstrike support, but eventually ISIS will have to be dislodged and defeated on the ground. So that is something that we can't get around, and at the moment ISIS is firmly entrenched in a significant part of Iraq as well as being in Syria. And if they are going to embed themselves in some of the villages and towns and cities, Mosul, for example, has 2 million people, it is very important for us to realize that this is going to take a long time and will involve some very serious operations where we want to make sure that there is no collateral damage. I was in Iraq for about a week, a few days, 2 weeks ago, and it is very clear, and all of the parties agree, that we must provide a greater contribution in terms of humanitarian effort, that we must continue our diplomatic efforts, we must continue to deal with Iraqi refugees. But the question is, militarily, other than our current role of providing airlift and the fact that we are going to provide tactical advice, what is the potential that this role could modify itself in the coming months, because it is going to take a long time. And that is why it is extremely important for Canada to think this through, and for Parliament to be informed in case there are any changes. And Mr. Speaker, I should add that I will be splitting my time with the member from Vancouver Quadra. I apologize for not mentioning that before. When I went to Iraq, and I want to thank the Minister of Foreign Affairs for including myself and the critic for the NDP in this trip, we had the opportunity to see something that you don't see when you just read clippings and watch the television. We saw some of the refugees that are in the camps up in northern Iraq, and they told us, the United Nations, that they were planning and they had money to build about 8 to 10 of these, but they needed 25 of these camps. The conditions over there, they have been overwhelmed by literally hundreds of thousands of Iraqis who have fled the terror of ISIL and are now crowding into northern Iraq. We met Chaldean Christians who were huddling around the church, the Chaldean church in Erbil, and literally could not even go to a refugee camp. That's how drastic the situation was, because there was no refugee camp to accommodate them. So it's very clear that we need to do a great deal more on the humanitarian side. But what about the military side? And why should Canada care? Why, as some Canadians have said, are we getting involved over there? Well, the reason is because this affects all of us. This is not just an Iraqi or a Syrian problem. This is a problem that concerns the collective security of the world. We have, according to Foreign Affairs, about 130 Canadians that have gone over to that region. And some of them have come back, and they've been radicalized. And they are in this country right now, possibly trying to recruit more soldiers to go over and fight for ISIL. This is something that concerns us, and this is something that we cannot turn our backs on. The question is, what will our military role be? And mark my words, this is going to last a long time, not just 30 days. So we need to think about it seriously. We need to follow it very, very clearly, and we need the government to provide us with answers to the questions when they are worked out. Some of these things will take a little while to work out because military operations are complex. You can't sort of arrive with all the answers right from the beginning. There has to be some work done with the Kurdish Peshmerga to define the roles. There has to be work done with the other coalition members. This will be a complex operation that will involve not only ground operations, but also air operations. But we expect the government to keep us informed, and most of all, we expect the government to tell us if they are contemplating any change of role. So humanitarian, yes, we need to do more. We all agree, the Minister of Foreign Affairs even agreed, we need to actually deliver on results there. We need to continue our diplomatic efforts, as we did when we met with the President of Iraq and the Foreign Affairs Minister. And yes, we have to encourage that country to be inclusive of its Shiite, of its Sunni, of its Kurd citizens, but also its minorities that are Christian and other ethnic minorities, so that they all are going to be working with one common purpose, which is to get rid of ISIS. There are still many questions that will be needed to be answered in the coming weeks and coming months, dealing with what roles the different members of the coalition will perform. And we don't have the answers to that. I think we have to understand that it does take a while to get these, but I think that my parting message, Mr. Speaker, is that Canadians must get used to the idea that this is not something that's going to be over in 30 days and Canada will walk away from it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions in